Joe, an outright stunner in Oxford comes from yesterday as Kentucky walks in to the SIP and gets a win over the number 7 Ole Miss Rebels. Your thoughts about this game?
All right, well, we're about to yell about this. Look, I get what you were trying to say in the open about Kentucky. I think that they do deserve recognition and respect for the way that their defense is played. I think
just
that
always
they
want to talk about the winning team first.
Understandable, but I think that our attention needs to be directed in this because look, Kentucky at best, they still have to play Tennessee, they still have to play Texas. I think that at the best, they are an 8-4 football team. Their offensive issues are going to show up in other games, and there's a possibility that they finish with a worse record than that. I am focused on what the storyline here is, and it's clear that you don't agree with me on this.
No, I agree with you.
Well, what I was going to say is that Lane Kiffin, his inability, man, to meet expectations has to be called into question. And I understand that Ole Miss is not a perennial SEC powerhouse in the conference, but with all the resources that he was funneled this season, and for all the Ole Miss fans saying in our comments when we suggested he could go to Florida that there's no shot that he leaves, he has a better situation at Ole Miss. They're an up-and-coming program. They're an up-and-coming university in the football and athletics landscape. For all of the hype that was given to him this offseason of being an SEC championship caliber team, if you're losing to Kentucky, might be a quality opponent, that is going to hurt your chances. This is not the Big Ten. This is not the ACC. This is not the Big 12. We all know this. This is obvious. You can't lose to a middle of the pack to back end team in the conference and expect to be in the championship conversation.
You mean like what happened with Nick Saban when he won his last national title and lost to Texas A&M in that season? Or like what Kurt
Wait. Texas A&M had a good record that year.
No, they were 5-7. In 2022, they were 5-7. You can go look it up your damn self, but they were 5-7 when Alabama lost to them. They lost to a 5-7 football team. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, okay? But Kirby also in Georgia.
5-7.
They went 5-7. Joe, I get what you're trying to say. I think of Urban Meyer. Remember when Urban Meyer were losing to teams against like Purdue? Okay,
Wait a minute. 2022 was not the year that they beat Bama.
It was 2021, but they lost.
They were 8-4. They were 8-4 that year. So
who was?
Texas A&M in 2021 was 8-4, and that was the year that they beat Bama.
No, they lost into them in 2022. Did they not?
No, they didn't. Alabama beat them in 2022. That's what their website says.
Oh,
that's unimportant. All I'm saying is that this year at the top of the conference, that's
still to my point. It's still far of that Saban lost to a mid-level SEC opponent.
There are far more teams than usual that are worthy of that conversation. You now have to. This is how hard this path is now. You have to hope that you can box out a 11-1 Georgia team and that you beat Georgia. That all of those things go according to plan. That they need a lot to help them to get into the SEC championship game. They didn't have Texas back then in the conference playing as good as they are right now.
Joe, I understand what you're saying. I just here's what I'd say. I legitimately understand your concern and your criticism of Kiffin. Kiffin has never had a season where he's had multiple 10-win years, right? I understand what you're starting off with here. I don't think that you're giving Kentucky enough credit because here's what I think has happened. Okay, I think they went up against a really good South Carolina team with a whole new brand of personnel on offense, and they got flabbergasted. There's a good white dude word for you. They got absolutely punched in the mouth. Flabbergasted is a white old man. It's our dad. Our dads use the word flabbergasted, all right?
Good word. I like that word.
Of course you do. Look at you, all right? They played South Carolina, who, Joe, to all extent, Ole Miss has South Carolina this week. And there's a strong – and by the way, they have them in Columbia. I'm really worried for Ole Miss going into that game for themselves. You're right. But I look at Kentucky. You lose to what is probably a really good South Carolina team, okay? You lose by a point to Georgia, and then you beat Ole Miss. I just don't think that you're giving – by the way, they had their best corner out. And they in that front seven still found a way to keep them in the football game. And finally, that Kentucky offense, who had not scored a touchdown against a Power 4 opponent all year, which I know Ole Miss fans hate to hear this, They finally found a way. Vandegrift finally found a way. I think that they're I don't believe this. Your record says what you are. Okay. They played 3 really tough opponents and went 1-2 of them. Their perception, hold on one second. If I would have told you 5 weeks into the season that Kentucky would be 3-2 and also they're playing Ole Miss and Georgia, what would you have said? You would have said, all right, well, I mean, that's about par for the course, even though that we know that they're really good defensively. The problem is that they lost to South Carolina and then they beat Ole Miss. It's who they played and who they lost and won to that we're overlooking them. Joe, I'm going to be real with you. Nobody in the SEC wants to go up against that front seven from Kentucky.
No, I don't disagree with that. I think that Kentucky's front seven is ridiculously good, and they're good. I phrased them that they're a giant killer defense.
Okay,
they're good enough to still upset teams.
To that point, I understand what you're saying, but I think the problem in this game, now getting to the game, Kentucky absolutely punched Ole Miss right in their shit. They punched them right in the mouth, and there was nothing that Ole Miss can do. They couldn't run the football effectively. Quite honestly, Lane Kiffin's play calling was abysmal. It was abysmal. What they did on third down was really bad. I'm not going to write him off on one loss. It's not going to happen.
But this is the thing, though, and it's kind of like our Marcus Freeman debates that we have, is that there are a string of losses when he needs to step up to the plate and have his best performances.
He's not losing in Northern Illinois.
That's not what I'm comparing it to. I'm not comparing it to the Northern Illinois loss, but like if we pull together the string of games where Ole Miss needed to have strong seasons, strong games, like the Alabama game last year is a perfect example. Alabama was dealing with so many offensive woes, and that game was the turnaround point for Alabama last year. A game where you should have won and you had more momentum than them.
I 100% agree. I'm not taking away and saying that Lane doesn't have egg on his face. He's got massive egg on his face. I'm not willing to not give Kentucky benefit of the doubt when they play more and tougher opponents. And look, we don't know what Ole Miss is. All I'm saying here is this. Look, Sal's make fights, and it's not Alabama. Ole Miss is not a physical football team. They're not. No. They got pushed around on both lines of scrimmage. Outside of Walter Nolan, which everybody's like, oh, did you see Walter Nolan? Walter Nolan wrecked shit yesterday. Newsflash to everybody. That kid can play. They are not the more physical football team when you go up against Ole Miss is who's going to win the football game. That in and of itself has been the reason that they've lost. Now, I think that Lane's trolling does play a part in this, and they got a little too big for their britches, and they got pegged down a notch. Jackson Dart was not good yesterday at all. I look at him, 18 of 27, 261 and a touchdown. Joe, I'll give Lane Kiffin this. There were some wide open dudes that Dart missed. Some wide open, schemed up dudes that he missed. I thought he got flustered. I thought that he legitimately didn't know where to go with the football at times. He just didn't look engaged. And by the way, that front seven I thought when Octavius Oxendine, which is the best name in college football right now, the defensive tackle for Kentucky, Joe, when he got sacked the first time, meaning Dart, I felt like mentally he got checked out. I really, really, really do. He got hit multiple times. I think he got hit 14 times on 28 dropbacks. That's half. He got hit on half of his dropbacks, Joe. And that's where I'm like, look, man, if you're physical with them, they will fold. That's why I don't want to give – that's why I just can't say that Kentucky just didn't take it to him. Now.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'll say this. This is where I want to lean my hat on. They were bad offensively. Are you 1,000% confident that an Ole Miss team with Lane Kiffin is going to have those bad offensive performances throughout the season again? Because I don't.
BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts. But here's what my whole point with talking about Ole Miss. That is not the hardest defense that you're going to face. If your team fails to step up to the challenge when they put up all those stupid points up on nothing teams that they played, if you're failing to perform against what is a great defense in the SEC, but not the best defense in the SEC, it is legitimate cause for concern when that's supposed to be your strong suit. Is Lane Kiffin's play calling, all the weapons that you have. I really think
Juice Wells. I mean, did Juice Wells even play?
I don't remember off the.
That's a great question because nobody would know. You can find him with a search warrant.
Look, I don't mind giving credit to Kentucky for their performance. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But Kentucky's not a top 5-6 team in the conference. This conversation would be completely different if that they were a top team in the conference, they were in the SEC championship conversation, all of those things, and Ole Miss lost. They lost to a one-sided Kentucky team. Their defense is really good. I think for me personally, this is so telling of the issues that Ole Miss has this season, which is their offensive line is much weaker than we anticipated because they could not
a good O-line.
Jackson Dart from being pressured on situations where he needed a clean pocket. And secondly, Pete Golding and that secondary were not ready to play in this game. The holding penalties, the big splash plays, the contested catches that they gave up. Hold on one second. The contested catches, all those things that they gave up in this game was very concerning because just like that's not the best defense you're going to play, there are way better receiving units and offenses that you're going to have to see for the remainder of this season. I'm telling you right now, this Ole Miss team is on a track. If they don't bounce back from that game and fix all of the issues, which are glaring issues at the current moment, they are a 9-3 football team, and they're standing on the outside of the playoff looking in. We're deep enough into the season to have that context.
I agree with you that on paper, the Kentucky wide receivers played really well. Okay, however, that defense was on the field for 40 minutes yesterday, meaning Ole Miss's. I mean, Lane gave them zero help whatsoever. So the time of possession in reference to Kentucky, okay, Joe, what did they do? They out-physicaled you. They kept the ball away from you. They did exactly what they needed to do. Here's another thing, which I think hurt the defense. Well, I still think Ole Miss defensively wasn't that bad. Joe, Ole Miss was 1 for 10 on third down offensively. 1 for 10. Like Lane, they got out-coached in that regard. Completely outcoached. I get what you're saying. And look, the game that they have this week versus South Carolina is a massive one. Joe, you have two teams that are going to be fighting for their playoff lives here. So we'll see.
This video is sponsored by the online fitness training camp presented by Chris Gates Fitness. When I first started talking about Chris, about partnering with our show, not only was I excited to have a fitness sponsor for our pod, but more importantly, when I found out about how he can help people achieve their goals, I was even more bought in because when the football season starts, it is so tough to stay on top of things and also to be able to enjoy yourself on Saturdays when it's game day. With Chris Gates Fitness's online training camp, you're going to be able to effectively stay focused, consistent, burn fat, build muscle, and do it with a like-minded community of individuals working towards the same thing. On top of this, you're going to be able to get direct coaching from Chris and the ability to ask him questions with an access to a live Q&A where you can get direct personalized support from Chris himself. Don't wait any longer. If you're trying to get in shape during this fall and you want to be able to do it with the right support system, head on over to chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp or click the link in the description. And you need to do it today because you can get the first month. Personal training is expensive, folks. The first month for only $10 when you use that code RuffinoJoe. Don't wait any longer. Head on over there.